Right. In the museum collection, there's actually a chair that was reportedly looted from a black church during the massacre. Paul, how do objects like this testify to memory and loss?
Well, I think this is a great example of an object that not only testifies to memory and loss, but it also becomes an opening for us to talk about how we value history, how we talk about wealth, how we talk about what is lost, not just lost from memory, but what was lost, what was the material effect of that loss, and how can we think about restoring that loss? How can we actively think and talk about repair? And so this chair, which was found in a consignment shop from one of our friends in Tulsa, Vanessa Adams Harris, who is herself a playwright who's written a play using the testimonies from survivors and witnesses to the race massacre, donated this chair to the museum. And I think it really becomes a way of talking about what we still have to understand about our past. I think it's also a tremendous window into this story of Black churches and Black spirituality, right?
Mm.
Both as the targets of racial violence, of which there were at least 8 churches that were burned to the ground during the massacre, but also as sites of sanctuary, not just during that massacre, but in the relief efforts that Mary was talking about, the ways in which churches galvanized themselves with businesses to provide relief immediately, even before the Red Cross could come in. There were churches that were advertising, sometimes through the Black press nationally, to help our brothers and sisters in Greenwood recoup, reclaim themselves, piece their lives back together.
Right.
So
Paul,
this is an example of an object that can do so much work.
Paul, you also found postcards, some showing burning corpses.
Yeah.
Why were these postcards depicting such gruesome violence, and why were they? Yeah, what was the point of
Yeah.
these postcards?
I I think we have to understand a little bit of the nature of our history of racism in this country. Certainly during this time, there were hundreds of lynchings of African Americans, mostly men, across the nation. Um, up through the 1920s and 1930s. Even today, the US Senate is trying to pass an anti-lynching law. We have to recognize that these kinds of acts of violence, whether they were on a mass scale or on an individual scale, were reinforced in culture through things like postcards that were circulated, that were celebrated by people who were enacting and participating and witnessing these forms of violence. And that was their purpose. They were created as, I would call them, instruments of terror, right? To strike fear into people. Now, what is massively important about them is that over time, if treated carefully and with respect, those same instruments of terror can be used as evidence for legal evidence, but also evidence of what happened so that we can look history squarely in the face with clear eyes.